When you talk about the challenge and changing the culture, are you looking to any other countries for a template?
Well, I actually, I come from the oil and gas industry. So I spent 35 years working in the oil and gas industry. So my sort of first model, if you like, from my own perspective is the experience that I went through in that industry. And I saw an extraordinary culture change occur in that industry over the last sort of 20 years or so. And I think, and people will have heard me, I'm sure, talk about workforce safety as an example of that culture change. Because today, workforce safety in the rail industry is not where it needs to be. You know, we actually hurt and injure far too many people, and compared to other major engineering industries. And so we need to look to some of those other industries and say, what is it that they have done differently? How do they drive that kind of change in safety culture? Because that will also be a key driver of performance culture. Because safety and performance, they go hand in hand. They absolutely do. And too many of our people in the front line actually don't believe we really mean that. And that's part of the culture change that we have to drive.
You were talking about the devolution, a route-based devolution.
Yeah.
If you've got a shortage of highly trained, skilled people in the industry, how are you going to make sure that these route-based devolutionary proposals are going to deliver high-quality travel for the customer?
Well, that is a really, really difficult balancing act to get right, because if you divide up the company as we have done into these 8 routes, you do run the risk of having sort of mini empires, and you do run the risk that you suboptimally use the resources that you have. So that's why you have to marry it with a sort of functional organization as well across the company, so that you can deploy your expertise, your top expertise at the most critical locations in the network. So
this question comes from complete ignorance, but if you come from the energy industry, and I can remember at university there were lots of engineering undergrads sponsored by companies like Shell and BP and so forth. Why does Network Rail have an undergrad sponsor for engineers and systems analysts?
Yes, we do.
Is it big enough?
We recruit about 170 graduates a year.
No, I mean undergraduates. I mean, what about helping undergraduates through the same way that the oil industry used to help? If you went in as an undergraduate with the imprimatur of the oil industry, you went there in your holidays, you had a job at the end of it, and you were sponsored through.
We do some of that. I think we can do more, actually, and I think it is an area where we need to do more. But attracting high-quality graduates is, we've been very successful at doing that. We do have, as I said, about 170 every year, as well as 200 or so apprentices every year. But part of the problem we've got is, how do you make railways seem really exciting to young people, to want to come and be part of the railway industry? And I think back when I was an undergraduate, thinking, what do I want to do? I honestly never thought about rail. It never occurred to me 35 years.
Because going like that.
Yeah, I just looked at it. It was a dying industry, and the North Sea was just, North Sea tigers, and it was just the world's most exciting industry to be a part of. And I wanted to be a part of that. Today, if I was an undergraduate today, I honestly think I would approach it 100% different, because I think the future in transport is just the most exciting challenge that we face as engineers today. And we need to become really clear advocates of that. And digital railway is part and parcel of an exciting new future that people want to be part of.
Question from the gentleman in the second row. Any questions here? We've got a couple of minutes. Can we put the lights in the house up so I can see more? Yes, there's a question there. Yep, first one.
Tony Latiana from UK Power Network Services. Mark, and Kirsty, you spoke about moving it to the 8 regional, sort of decomposed regional authorities. Is there a move to go towards the water industry model and the energy industry model in becoming privatised and looking for investment?
Well, I'm not talking about breaking it up, because I think there is enormous strength in having a national network. We are a national, I mean, the pictures I showed how interrelated all of these routes are with one another. So we need a national network, not just for economies of scale, but for effective operation of the network, for planning and so on. So we have to try and get the best of both worlds. And that's why I strongly believe in creating these regional, or these route-based companies, locally focused. The issue about private capital is, of course, a really important one. How do we, I would like to find ways of introducing more risk capital into the industry. But I don't just want rent capital, I want risk capital. I want people to bring technology and bring their skills and put skin in the game, not just, move money around. That's what I'm really interested in.
Anthony Oliver from Infrastructure Intelligence. Mark, I think everyone would agree that getting ahead and getting digital railway much more accelerated and much faster on the system is a key priority. You say we need to be more aggressive about the way we tackle the challenges. I think you were very aggressive with your electrification programme, but of course that has now been scaled back, perhaps been a bit too aggressive. I mean, how do you get around this problem? But if you do try and be aggressive, perhaps it isn't really what you're capable of delivering right now.
Yeah, so I think it's a really important point. And that's why I think what we have to do with digital railway is really spend the time up front getting the front-end engineering part of it really right. So do we really understand what the challenges are? Do we really understand what these barriers are? And let's make sure we design it and prepare it properly so that we don't rush sort of headlong into a program and then, with a lot of the problems that then can result. My entire career spent in major projects, the single most important lesson to learn is front-end engineering. Yeah? Get the front-end engineering right, and then projects will follow really smoothly.
So you must have been devastated by the Transpennine pause in electrification.
Well, obviously it's a grave disappointment to many, many passengers to see that some of our
Whose decision
programs...
was that finally?
Well, I mean, clearly the Secretary of State has made his statement on this, and he's paused a number of these programs while we think through how do we execute this incredibly ambitious infrastructure program in the most effective and efficient way.
Isn't it deeply, deeply frustrating for professionals working in the railway industry to be stymied by politicians?
No, I'm certainly not being stymied by politicians. I think the Secretary of State would rather argue it the other way around. The point here is that what we have to do is we have to level with the public about just how difficult this task is. We have to lay out a proper, really carefully thought through plan and then deliver it. The reality is, people need to realise this, that when we came into this 5-year control period, we had about £8 billion associated with major investment projects other than Crossrail and Thameslink. And 95% of those projects were at the very earliest phases of their development. They were literally an idea. So of course, as you then develop that idea, as you do the kind of front-end engineering work that I've explained, then you have a much better sense of what the plan is, and sometimes it's going to take longer than you originally thought, and it's going to cost more than you originally thought. But it's far better, in my opinion, to confront that issue early on, then to be able to set out a realistic program which we can then deliver. That's why I'm very grateful to the Secretary of State for actually, helping us to confront this issue and help us to address it.
Peter Macbeth from New Lower Thames Transport Tunnel. I've got a project to put the rail across the Thames, and I'm raising the money for that privately to open up the rail network. Will I get the network support for that?
Come and talk to me.
Ian Tucker from Burgess Salmon. I'd like to ask a question about the digital railway and from the customer experience as well. The rail industry as a whole has access to a huge amount of data about passenger flows, about passenger preferences, all sorts of things down to purchasing requirements. How can the industry properly make use of that in order to improve both its own functioning profitability and the passenger experience?
Well, I'm strongly in favour of open access to information. So the train performance data that is currently held on, as an example, that's currently held on the Darwin database is now available to app developers and so on. And you see many apps now being developed to give people better information and higher quality information. I strongly encourage that. But I also would go one stage further than that and say I think we need to encourage, with the DFT's support, more open information around franchising and around passenger experiences through the franchising process, so that we can gradually open up the industries and make it clearer and more transparent to people how we operate and where the costs are and so on.
Brown, Railway Vehicle Engineering in Derby. Mark, you mentioned the challenge of 95% of £8 billion worth of projects not being above GRIP 3. What is your view, please, of control periods and the role of ORR?
So, well, I mean, the first point is that we knew, and everybody knew, going into the control period, that what I've just described was the case. So we specifically worked with the regulator to put in place a cost mechanism called the Enhancement Cost Adjustment Mechanism, which would enable us, if project costs changed and increased, to get the regulatory agreement to that, so that it could then be funded on our debt. Now, because of the change in our debt status, that's now, you know, somewhat of a it's not redundant, because we still have to go through that process, but we can't just continue to add debt. So we need to reflect on that going forward as to how we now want these sorts of control periods to operate. But the other point that the Secretary of State mentioned was the review that he's triggered led by Colette Bowe, which is looking at exactly this point. How best should we construct control periods going forward on major enhancement projects? And I've been very clear on my view on this, and that is that I think the Crossrail and the Thameslink model is a very good model, where you actually take a programme of work and you really work the front-end engineering. And I'm sorry to go back to it, but I can't emphasise it enough. You do the design, you do all the risk mitigation work, and then you reach a formal sort of sanction date where you say, I really know what I'm going to do, this is what it's going to cost, this is how long it's going to take, and then you fund it as a programme which may expand, a number of control periods. And I think that's the right way to approach these big, really big projects like the electrification projects and Crossrail and so on.
Bill Free, Carillion. I'm sorry, you've partly answered my question in answering the last one. But one of take the Midland mainline electrification. It came out in the high-level output statement. It's worked through. You did a lot of development work. We were engaged as a contractor to develop it further and move into delivery. And it's all stopped, and you sort of understand why that's happened. And part of the argument is, well, the trains on there are quite new anyhow, so the Meridian trains are quite good, and why would you electrify it when you got relatively new stock on it? But that decision must have been. That decision sort of 4 years late, isn't it? Someone should have been saying in the high-level output statement, yeah, it's a great idea to do it, but actually the trains are pretty new, they're diesel, so they work. And do you think that in CP6 we're going to avoid that sort of thing happening again?
Well, I think it's a complicated case because, of course, the big advantage for Midland mainline was not in terms of passenger experience, because you're quite right about the trains, but it was in terms of, the bigger benefit was economy. It was the lower cost of operating electric trains versus diesel trains. So the business case was very strong. But the reason for recognising that it should be one of the programmes that probably should be paused or rethought through is because actually the passenger benefits associated with it are less than other programmes. And this is one of the challenges that we now have to face with the Peter Hendy review over the next few months, is as we look at this programme, we need to consult with passengers and local communities and councils and so on about what is the right way to think about the rephasing of these programmes. Because there are many conflicting priorities here from freight, from passenger experience, from speed, from capacity, and cost in terms of the running of the services. And we have to, find the right way of marrying all of those things together to come up with a programme that we know we can deliver and that really maximises the benefits for customers.
Mark, you talked about end-to-end journeys, and how will that potentially change the supply chains that the existing rail sector seems to have? Do we have to sort of broaden our outlook?
Well, I think I think about it purely from the perspective of a customer. You know, customers really, I mean, customers don't care who runs the trains, they don't care who runs the track, that's not of interest to them. They don't care about how we control the trains, they don't care what signalling system we use. They just care about their journey. They just want to get to where they want to get to as smoothly and as seamlessly as possible. And I think we need to really focus our attention on how do we make every aspect of that journey, from the moment they wake up and, you know, and pick up their phone and think, how am I going to get to work today, or wherever it may be, how can we provide them with information that makes that journey as smooth as possible? And I think all of us in the rail industry today would be the first to acknowledge that we're not doing as well in that area as we can do. And we need to grasp the opportunity that digital technology provides us to really focus on giving customers that great experience.
Just before we go, I mean, I think that whole opening of the Edinburgh Galashiels line is just fantastic. Will there be another line opened in the next 5 years?
What, Borders?
No, after that one.
Well, so we've got railways in Chilterns will be opening, and there will be others. I mean, there's enormous, you know, everywhere I go in the country, whoever I meet, I promise you, every single council that I deal with, every single LEP that I talk to, they want more railways, they want more stations, they want more trains. Nobody's saying to me, can you please shut my railway? Absolutely nobody. So the beaching cuts of 1960, they're not going to be unwound, but we will be looking more and more at how, you know, where can we open up new railways.
Because you own all the track beds, you still own all that.
Well, we don't, no, unfortunately we don't. A lot of it, a huge amount of it was sold off, and a lot more was sold off 20 years ago in the rail track days as well.
But you can still go from.
But there are amazing cases. I mean, Borders is a fantastic case. I mean, here we've got a railway, it's been shut for 50 years, and there's this amazing viaduct just outside Edinburgh, untouched, literally untouched for 50 years, and we come along and say, well, is it still serviceable for a railway? And with a bit of polyfiller, it's perfect.
That's engineering for you.
It's proper engineering. So we're very fortunate that the Victorians, I mean, they built amazing railways, and a lot of that is still there. And so we will be looking at where we can, you know, go next exactly, and open up. And the thing that's so exciting about Borders, and it is a great example because it really changes communities.
Oh, completely.
It takes one of the poorest parts of Scotland, down in Galashiels, and connects it to the wealthiest part of Scotland. It's only 30 miles away. And it will completely change the economic destiny of that part of the country.
Thank you. Thank you.